Chapter 11. The Masks of the Dungeon. Fay Rodis was unable to see the Lord until her unexpected transfer to the repository of history. He avoided a farewell audience. A tall, thin serpent-bearer who served as an intermediary between the chairman of the Council of the Four and Rodis announced that the Great One was extremely busy with state affairs. The coincidence of busyness with the adventures of the previous week would have amused Rodis had it not been for anxiety about her friends situated in the city. Before departure from the Palace of Zoam, she still managed to install a microsensor of coordinates. The new dwelling of Fay Rodis, despite the grimness of the architecture and the desolation, seemed to her more comfortable than the Palace of the Gardens of Zoam. It did not live up to the lavish name of the Repository of History, being merely an old temple, once built in honor of Almighty Time. Not a deity, but rather a symbol that was worshipped in the old days by non-religious Tormancians. The Temple of Time consisted of 6 long buildings of large blue bricks. They stood parallel, adjoining an open gallery 2 meters above the ground, and were framed by a low balustrade of intertwined serpents. The gables of each of the 6 buildings were supported by twisted columns of rough cast iron. A neglected garden with low thorny trees and shrubs grew between the temple and the high red wall, along the ridge of which the lilac guards with their bells on their chests from time to time strolled. The dry earth heated during the day radiated a dust-smelling warmth at night. Inside the buildings there was nothing but piles of books. In the center of each hall stood tall slabs of grained gray and red stone, dotted with intricate patterns of ancient inscriptions. In front of the slabs there were stone trays for collecting donations. Side chapels on the upper floors were lined with wardrobes and shelving filled with books. Piles of half-rotted manuscripts, newspapers, reproductions or prints were piled up in the empty walls. The picture was already quite familiar to Rodis. On the planet Yanyak, there were no specially built storage facilities. They were content with perfunctorily adapted empty old buildings. There were no real museums here either, with a wide-ranging exposition, specially created optical dioramas, special lighting and protection from dust and temperature changes. Preserved on the upper floors were numerous rooms and cellules of unknown purpose, narrow corridors, rickety balconies, and mezzanines. When the serpent-bearer led Rodis to choose housing, Tel, who always accompanied the earthly mistress, managed to whisper to her that she should insist on the 5th building from the gate. The serpent-bearer, expecting that Rodis would want to settle closer to the gate, was delighted, but out of cowardly caution asked why she was pleased by the 5th temple. "The building is better preserved," Rodis answered without hesitation. "And besides, on the landing stairs there is a wonderful snake." "Indeed, indeed," agreed the serpent-bearer. Fay Rodis hadn't bent her soul. The snake sculpture in the 5th temple really did differ from the 2 types of statues adopted throughout the planet. Usually they depicted a snake rising from wide rings in the threatening pose of the cobra of earth, or standing on the tip of its tail, unfurled like a spring, with its mouth directed towards the sky. Both types of snake expressed anger and battle readiness. In the 5th temple, an unknown sculptor had depicted a huge cast-iron snake in a pose of despair, asymmetrical, as if broken in convulsions, twists of the coils, painfully bent back upper body, narrow mouth, opened in a silent cry. The snake, like people, felt its captivity and was trying to escape from it. The sculptor had undoubtedly been anticipating the concept of inferno. Rodis was allocated housing of 2 hastily cleaned little rooms permeated with the smell of dust and old paper on the mezzanine of the 5th building. They carried in the furniture brought in advance. Rodis wanted to choose 2 relatively comfortable square rooms connected to a balcony overlooking the side of the temple facing the mountains. And again, Tail, seizing the moment, advised her to settle in 2 asymmetrical cubicles close to the end of the steeply curved roof. The serpent-bearer ordered the lilacs to arrange furniture and all the belongings of Rodis, which consisted, as is known, of 1 SDP with a bag of spare batteries, took his leave with a bow, announcing that he would be calling in on the mistress of the Earthlings from time to time in order to check the amenities of her housing and maintenance. The great and wise, the serpent-bearer, bowed down as usual, commanded me to tell ye, in view of extreme danger, not to leave the repository of history. Here are guards capable of repelling an attack. There is always danger on the streets of the city, and the Lord, another bow, is convinced that ye will refuse personal protection. I will. The great Choyo Chagas foresaw everything, and now I take my leave. In order to assist ye, as before, Engineer Huntelo Tolofrail remains." The serpent-bearer nodded casually in the direction of the engineer and left. Under heavy footsteps, the wooden floor of the corridor and stairs creaked. A quiet fell over the old temple. Having stood in silence, with an absent air, Teo revived. With a gesture calling Rodis to silence, he snatched out a notepad, drew some signs, and held it out to Rodis. She read, "Can the SDP serve as a detector of electronic devices and chemical poisons?" She nodded affirmatively and revived the non-apped. The SDP brought forth a greenish, flickering torch, the beam of which swept the rooms but did not change color. But the black sphere with a limb for counting immediately began to move its antennae, pinpointing 2 destinations in the first room and 4 in the second. Following their instructions, Tale found 6 boxes of dark wood in the furniture, in the closet, and in the niche of the window. Obeying the engineer's instructions, Rodis pierced each with devastating ultrasound. The operation took only a few minutes. Tale breathed a sigh of relief and asked Rodis to establish the protective field. "Now you can speak freely," he said, taking a seat on the sofa. "Why such precautions?" smiled Rodis. "Let them listen and record." "In no case," the engineer exclaimed triumphantly. "Now ye will understand everything." In choosing a secluded place, Chagas made his first big mistake. In very old temples, there are labyrinths of secret rooms, forgotten over time and unknown to the rulers, because far-sighted researchers, historians, and architects managed to keep the secret for us lowly. In 2 similar buildings, the Mirror Tower in the Tail Hemisphere and the Dome of the White Honeycombs in the capital, the devices of the DPE and SMI are now multiplying. And this Temple of Time has been studied recently. A friend of mine, an architect for the restoration of old buildings, managed, and even then by accident, to find the ancient plans. Here ye are completely free. At any moment, from under the noses of the lilacs, ye may leave the repository of history or meet here with anyone ye want. The second is much more important, Rodis said with delight. It is a guarantee of safety for people who come to me. I don't now need an exit to the city. Spying on me is sure to get someone in trouble. But actually, I can always, whenever I want, pass through the guard of lilacs." "Really?" Tale cried in amazement and reverence. "How is this possible?" "Ye will see," Rodis promised. "But how can we see the plans? Tomorrow I will bring the architect, and now I will show the underground passage. Shortly, I will have to leave so as not to incur suspicion by staying with ye for too long without witnesses." "All right then." The engineer entered the back room, chosen as the bedroom, knelt down near the thick wall, and, taking the leg of Rodis, put the toe end of her foot against an inconspicuous hole in the floor. Striking the heel lightly, he forced Rodis to press a hidden latch. Powerful springs pulled the narrow and thick slab aside, and the musty air of a dungeon wafted in from a vertical crack. The engineer entered the black darkness, beckoning Rodis to follow him. There, he lit a flashlight and pointed to a rusty lever, turning which closed the passage. Here, it is possible only to enter, but it is necessary to return a different way. In those days, there was no automation, but even then, it would not have survived over many centuries, said Teo. They descended along a narrow stone staircase in the thickness of the wall, turned twice and began to climb. On the last step, a sickle-shaped handle protruded from the walls. Rodis pressed it and involuntarily squinted her eyes against the light, finding herself in her bedroom only on the other side. Teo jumped, grabbed the end of the cornice above the window, and smoothly lowered down on it, retruding the wall. If someone accidentally turns the handle, the wall will still remain closed. The Tormansian shone like a boy who had discovered treasures. Tomorrow we will be waiting for ye outside the wall at the same time. If there is any interference, give a signal with SDP infrasound. Food for ye will be brought from the palace of Zoam. Do not eat anything, we ourselves will feed ye. Knowing your simple taste, I have no doubt that ye will find our food edible. But today ye will have to fast. Fay Rodis just smiled. And now I must say goodbye to ye, said Tale, taking Rodis's hand and intending to bring it to his lips. After the gift of death, she allowed the engineer this tenderness and sometimes kissed him on the forehead herself. But today she took her hand away slightly and said, I will go with ye. How? What for? And the lilacs? Fay Rodis smiled. She walked down to the statue of the snake and stepped out onto an open gallery under the sparsely starred night sky. The lilacs, trampling at the entrance to the fifth temple, haughtily greeted the known-to-them tale and did not notice Rodis. At the main gate were gathered several lilacs, with the commander at the head. Observing formalities, he demanded Tail's card, not noticing the earthly woman walking next to him. Finally, Rodis and Tail exited onto the square towards the monument to Almighty Time. Rodis had seen it briefly from the car and decided now to examine it. 4 tall lanterns cast deathly mercury light onto the monument. "How will ye get back in?" Tail was concerned. "As I left." "Mass hypnosis," the engineer guessed. "We use it for public repentance. Biologists have developed a special apparatus in the form of a snake. A combination of music, rhythmic movement, and light hypnosis. We have many people with innate abilities. Strengthening them with special training, people become doctors, but I did not become a doctor." The gift, however, useless for the historian, has turned out to be unexpectedly useful. Footsteps were heard in the distance. The engineer disappeared behind the pedestal, and Rodis began to slowly walk around the ancient monument, trying to understand the feelings of the Yanyak people, who had lived a millennium ago. 4 giant-sized male figures fused together. To Almighty Time, Rodis read the huge golden characters on the round pedestal. Facing the open space, from where the narrow streets rising from the city converged, there stood, legs apart, a stone giant with a dispassionate, expressionless face. With both hands he held a wide shield with an inscription, from behind the upper edge of which a Tormanzian snake with a head compressed from the sides was bent over. Huge, venomous teeth protruded from the open mouth. "Whosoever disturbed the grave of time will be bitten by the awakened serpent." Read the inscription on the shield. On the right side, hiding with a smile the evil secret knowledge, time, in its second guise, let pass under an outstretched hand a series of faceless people emerging from under the pedestal. On the other side, the same giant, cruelly stretching out its wide mouth and flaring the nostrils of its flattened nose, brought down a thick cudgel, seeded with nails, on those who had skirted the sector of the pedestal. People writhed, protecting their faces and heads, falling to their knees, contorting, opening blackened mouths in frozen cries of suffering. Where the weapon could no longer reach, the procession plunged into a hole, closed by a barely noticeable lattice. The fourth side of the monument, facing the temple, was bordered by a glass path of the same color as the stone of the monument. Here, the fourth face of the giant was lit up with a smile, sad, imbued with consolation and strange triumph. With affectionate care, he bent over the crowd of young men and women, with strong and beautiful bodies aspiring towards him. They reached out to the giant, and he, as it were, smoothed the cornfield of the hands raised to him with his palm, and overturned a wide cup onto the faces turned to him with hope and joy. Quiet and focused, Fay Rodis returned to her secluded apartment and contacted Iviza via SDP, describing the location of her new home. Iviza connected via Noreen, and Rodis was calmed in the knowledge that her exile had not affected her comrades. Obviously, the displeasure of Choyo Chagas was directed only against her. Now for Rodis, no one was dearer than Chedi, Iviza, and Vir Noreen lost in the huge capital. Rodis feared for Chedi most of all. Being among the most ignorant and undisciplined part of the population, Chedi could not calculate all the motives for their actions. But Iviza assured that Chedi was doing well, and she had accumulated many interesting observations. And Rodis calmly fell asleep in the new place, not paying heed to the constant creaking of wooden beams and floorboards. In unpierceable darkness, like an ancient icon lamp, burned the tiny light of the SDP. It would immediately raise the alarm if an uninvited guest appeared or if the chemical composition of the air changed. At the appointed time, Rodis was dressed in Tormanzian style, in wide trousers, a blouse of smooth black fabric, and solid shoes. Instead of a torch, Rodis donned a diadem that automatically ignited in the dark and pressed the end of her foot into the recess in the wall. Before stepping into the opening, she set the SDP in the first room to automatically activate the field. Having secured her home from unexpected guests, Rodis pushed the plate of the wall behind her. At the end of the first staircase, Tail and the architect awaited her. The acquaintance began, as usual, with a long look and abrupt, as if casually spoken words. And no wonder to the shy, small-in-size architect, accustomed to the impoliteness of dignitaries and the rudeness of the outside world, Rodis, descending the stairs in a luminous diadem, seemed like a goddess. Tail only chuckled, remembering his own shock from his first meeting with Rodis. A zigzag descent led to a gallery that surrounded the central hall with a low vault and a ring of arcades. Stone benches were hidden in niches between arcades. The architect led his companions to the one where there was a brand new table and a massive cylinder with a column of double lanterns, turned it on. A strong reddish light flooded the dungeon. The architect stepped back slightly, bowed and identified himself. Gak du Den, or Gakden. He spread out a summary drawing of the dungeons of the Temple of Time, and Rodis was amazed at their size. 2 tiers of aisles and galleries, piercing the soil, scattered in all directions, throwing 6 long side lanes outside the garden and the wall. "This gallery goes under the statue of Time," explained the architect, "but we left it closed. It is too crowded a place." Passage number 5, to the left of it, is one of the most convenient. It ends in an old pavilion now occupied by high-voltage electrical transformers, to which we, the lolly, have free access. Even better is the 4th passage, deepened into the thickness of a rock on a slope rising towards the mountains. There, on a ledge, is the old building of the ZUG Chemical Laboratory. A vertical well descends from the basement of the laboratory, accessible to all who are initiated into the secret of the temple. Other passages go into open spaces, and with frequent use can be discovered, but in the case of flight they will come in useful. ZUG, one of the members of the Council of the Four? Rodis asked. I did not know he was a chemical scientist. Not at all. The architect laughed. With us, any institute, theater, or factory can be named after the great ones who have nothing to do with either science or art or anything at all except power. The custom is such, Teo confirmed as if apologetically. And I can meet with people in this room? Rodis looked around the spacious dungeon. I have the idea that here it is convenient for attackers to surround us. Let us go to the Sanctuary of 3 Steps. It is on the 2nd tier. The dungeons of the second horizon turned out to be more spacious. In some places, furniture made of ebony or loose cast iron, which was widely used on the planet with a shortage of pure metals, survived. The finest dust lay on things. The carefully polished walls were covered with a hard, vitreous layer. Beneath it were frescoes painted against a shiny black background with 2 of the favorite colors of Tormance, scarlet and canary yellow. The combination of 2 colors roughening up the images, at the same time gave them primitive savagery and strength. Rodis, involuntarily slowing down her steps, admired the creations of the ancient artists of Yanyak. Tael and Gakden paid no attention to the murals. As far as Rodis could judge, the frescoes expressed the inevitable coming of man to death along the inexorable passage of time. On the right side of the gallery, the senses of life slowly rose from carefree childish play to experienced maturity and faded away in old age, in a flash of despair followed by a sharp drop into death. It expressed itself in a sheer line, cutting off everything that came up to it. Beyond this line was only blackness. Against the same black background, a group of people crowded around the line, drawn with special expressiveness. Deformed by age and disease, people rested, huddled in a pile of bodies. But as soon as anyone touched the terrible line, as if severed, heads, hands, bodies disappeared into the darkness. On the left, the same black wall, there were no longer frescoes, but bas-reliefs immersed in glassy material, from which they emerged with a fabulous reality. The artist depicted here a sharp transition from a brooding pre-adolescence to juvenility, expressed by the growth of sexual feelings, as if the whole world was reduced to the rhythmics of dancing young bodies and an erotic rampancy. Red men and fiery yellow women intertwined in intricate poses. However, these amazing images still lacked the divine dignity of the erotic sculptures of ancient India and even the demonic depth of tantric frescoes in Tibet or paintings by Satanists of Iran. Mirror-black darkness sundered the procession of figures, not in waning decline, but at the moment of crescendo, boiling of feelings. The left wall, as opposed to the right, reflected the concept of early death. The idea of a rapid turnover of generations with the selection of the most capable of technical progress had obviously arisen in Tormance from the earliest times. The modern population of the planet had reaped the fruits of thoughts sown 1,000 years ago. The catastrophe of overpopulation had shaped this into a whole philosophy. The Black Gallery expanded. Over the heads of those walking hung monstrous masks, roughly and garishly painted. Huge open mouths, gnarled with ulcerous grins, bared inhumanly sharp teeth, astonishingly living eyes squinted with contemptuous mockery. Below these odious faces were a series of other masks, in the natural size of human faces, inscribed with an expression of hopeless melancholy. Spiritual decline was expressed in them so realistically that it aroused in Rodis an irresistible, heavy feeling. Masks have always been indicators of the psychological difficulties of life, causing the need to hide the true faces of a person and society. The allegory of masks here seemed extremely simple, but in terms of the grandeur of the design and the level of execution, they were not inferior to the frescoes of the Black Gallery. Rodis expressed this to the architect. Becoming animated, he asked her to wait. He and Tale together brought in a high bench, removed from the hooks the monstrous images, hollow, molded from light material. The masks covered a frieze of magnificent sculptures of young, beautiful people, with courageous and noble faces, which stretched along the entire length of the gallery. In their naked bodies there was neither the shyness nor the animal sexuality of the figures of the Black Gallery. Why were they covered with these hideousnesses? And when? Asked Rodis. In the epoch of the establishment of all planetary power, answered Gokten, in order to knock out another spiritual support from under man. Those who came here long ago, contemplated and pondered, became spiritually similar to the people of the past, inherited their strength, wisdom, clarity. They acquired courage, dream, and will, qualities that are intolerable for the lords. And that is why the friezes were covered with masks of the age of hunger and murder. Let's put them in their place, Tale. Do not. Let those who come here to us see both the exaggerated ghosts and the real life of Yanyak. The architect led them into a square hall, along its corners and cynical laughter masks were straining. 3 wide ledges rose up to the wall opposite the entrance. On each ledge stood 2 rows of stone benches. In the wall there was a niche, in it a wine table. The sanctuary of 3 steps, said the architect. Here I propose to establish a meeting place. The place is suitable, Tale approved and looked at Rodis. It is ye who should decide, knowing the life of Yanyak. I am only interested in the sanctuary. Why of 3 steps? Does it seem important to ye? The architect asked. Yes. Yes. I conjecture, but confirmation is needed. This is essential to me for a deeper understanding of the past spiritual life of Yanyak. Very well. I will find out, promised Gokten, and now I am leaving. I must prepare the room and guides. The architect disappeared into the darkness without igniting a lantern. Fay Rodis decided to follow his example and not use the infralocator. She told Tale about this, but the engineer objected. What does it matter, with or without light, if ye can make people not notice ye? And leave behind me those who may be hiding in the side passages, outside my attention? I probably will never learn to think like earthlings. First, about others, then about myself. From people to oneself. This is the course of almost all your reasoning. And ye smile at everyone ye meet, while we, on the contrary, conceal the fear of ridicule or insult with an arrogant look. Our rudeness always betrays the low psychic level of a life lived in fear. There is a polar difference between ye and us, Tale said with a bitterness. But it is not so serious, Rodis smiled. Come with me to count steps and turns. Or must ye also leave? No. I want to set up signalization to your rooms. They walked for a while in silence. Rodis helped the engineer to infix the thinnest of wire. The Grey Angels want to see ye, Tale said. Angels? And Grey besides? A very ancient secret society. We thought it had ceased operations during the Age of Prosperity. It turns out that they existed, but were inactive. Now, as they say, your DPE brings them back to life. A meeting with ye is essential. The sanctuary of 3 steps and the Grey Angels, Rodis said thoughtfully. Amazing. Can it be that all this was here too? What exactly? I'll tell you later, when Gokten has gained intelligence on the 3 steps, and I have visited with the Grey Angels. The rest of the day Fay Rodis spent pondering her next steps. Already for 18 days, her companions had been getting acquainted with the daily life of the city of the Center of Wisdom. A little longer, and their mission would end. Except for Vir Norin and her. For the astronavigator, it was not so easy to understand the intellectual higher echelon of Tormansian society, and she, Fay Rodis, must stretch the threads between the divided classes of the society of Yanyak, between people repeatedly deceived by history, entangled in the intricacies of political propaganda, wearied by the vapidity and purposelessness of life. Without a purpose, there can be no meaningful struggle. Here, the most expressive words and tempting ideas turned into empty spells that had no power. Even worse were the words turnskins, in the familiar and attractive sound of which a perverted meaning was gradually embedded. The road to the future dispersed along 1,000 small paths. Not one of them inspired confidence. All the foundations of society, and even simply a human community here, were completely destroyed. Order, faith, truth, and justness, dignity of man, even his cognition of nature. Everything had been destroyed by the rule of immoral, conscienceless, and ignorant people. The entire planet Yanyak had turned into giant ashes. Ashes of devastated souls, whose strength and dignity were also wasted in empty hatred, envy, and senseless struggle. And everywhere lies. Lies had become the basis of consciousness and social relations on this unfortunate planet. The trouble with this society was that the entire social struggle and the natural course of the historical process descended to a wild bandit level of violence, like tribal enmity, which knew only the purpose of seizing power, food, women. Once the warring parties were bound by certain moral religious foundations, and the objectives were to instill their beliefs, the organization of society, and the rules of life. And now man had completely disappeared from the site of the struggle for power. Everything was possible, power was allowed to anyone who was able to rise. These nefarious methods of all permissiveness had taken root everywhere and were applied in the family and the scientific laboratory, in the theater and in the shop, to say nothing of the organs of power. And the honor and dignity of man, which had now become a target for destruction, had been completely lost. This terrible state of faithlessness, skepticism, non-understanding of the path, gave rise, among other things, also to schizophrenia. According to secret estimates, about 60% of the population on Tormance was mentally ill. Hitherto, the Shuli had been despised by everyone, and the lowly, frightened by the serpent-bearers, had lived in constant fear. Now, a crisis was brewing. The Shuli and the lowly had realized that it was no longer possible to live like this. It was necessary to shuffle off the deception and lies that had ensnarled them. If it could be managed to show them the right path, destroy mistrust, then it would be possible to return home, to the ship, take off. How many more days remained to wait for these magic words? How many more days would she have to spend in the attic and the dungeon before she acquired the right to say these words to Griff Rift, who was growing impatient from anxiety? Soon she would have another difficult meeting with him by SDP. She needed one more nonaped, or at least its projector for device, in the Sanctuary of Three Steps. Falling asleep, Rodis sadly thought of her measure as a living being that remained in the gardens of Zoom. She rose with the first rays of the sun and barely had time to complete her morning exercises when a lilac appeared and announced the arrival, they never came but only arrived, of a special representative of the Lord of Yanyak. Somewhat surprised by the early visit, Fay Rodis met with a short, overweight dignitary. Gold snakes on the chest and shoulders testified to the very high rank of the direct assistant of the Council of the Four. The serpent-bearer relayed the greetings of Choyo Chagas. The earthly guest was in no way to take her migration as an exile or disfavor on the part of the Lord. The great and wise had decided that in the palace it was lonely, and it would be more pleasant to be closer to her companions. Rodis, hiding a smile, thanked him, adding that here she was as far from the city as in the palace. The dignitary sighed with mock grief. Yan Gaoyuar, he said, would take steps to provide her with security that would not interfere with her walks in the capital. Rodis expressed polite doubt. The serpent-bearer asked if she was being taken good care of by the people assigned to that. After talking about trifles, he stood up. His bored, dull face became alert, his sharp, intelligent eyes darted about. He leaned over to Rodis and, barely audibly, asked if she could turn on the machine for protection from eavesdropping. With an affirmative nod, Rodis turned the dial of the nonaped, stood in front of the chairs, and pulled out the emitter plates. The magnetic beam swept around the corners of the room, folds of curtains and furniture in case new apparatus had been installed there. The reassured dignitary again sat down in a chair and, without taking his stubborn gaze from Fay Rodis, spoke of the people's dissatisfaction with the power in modern life. Some top dignitaries, understanding this, were ready to change the current governance. In particular, he had in his hands the Lilacs, headed by Yan Gaoyuar himself. If Fay Rodis would assist him, then the power of Choyo Chagas and the entire Council of the Four would collapse. What, according to Yi, should I do for this? Rodis asked. Very little. Give us some of your machines, he glanced sideways at the SDP, and go on television to declare that ye are on our side. We undertake to arrange it. And what will happen after the overthrow of power? Ye Earthlings will have complete freedom of movement around the planet. Live with us as long as you want, do what you want, and when the second starship arrives, there will be no restrictions for it either. This is for us, guests, but for the people of Yanyak? The serpent-bearer frowned, as if Rodis had asked him a tactless question. He began talking extensively and confusedly about injustice, mass executions and torture, stupid dignitaries, the insignificance of the 3 members of the Council of the Four, and the majority of the Supreme Assembly, specially selected by Choyo Chagas, from the most ignorant and cowardly people. But Rodis inexorably brought him back to the essence of the matter, asking him to list the real changes in the life of the planet that would follow the overthrow of the Council of the Four. The serpent-bearer, becoming vexed, bit his lip, drummed his fingers on the armchair, and, realizing that it was impossible to get away with general words, began to list, "We will increase the amount of entertainment. In a short time we will build many houses of love, windows of life, recreation palaces on the shores of the equatorial sea. We will remove the restrictions on sexual performances. We will eliminate the responsibility of men for the initial stage of raising children. All this for both classes. Well, especially for the Sholi. The ban on transmissions from outer space must be lifted. I see no danger in this for the state. The transmissions are rarely perceptible and are incomprehensible." Rodis silently studied the dignitary, trying to understand the train of his thoughts. Then she said slowly, "Ye will repeal the law of early death. There will be neither Sholi nor Loli. Ye will not feed your children with counterfeit food. Ye will spend hundreds of times more on education, on better schools, travel, on the general improvement of life. Ye will build more hospitals, canteens, dwellings. Ye will create museums. The sciences and arts will be different. We will help you change and improve many things in the life of the people. Oh, all this is decidedly more difficult. The planet is too poor after the ages of hunger. It is impossible to accomplish this all immediately. Many of our arrangements are necessary. And believe me, the Sholi are happy, in their own way, of course." He looked at Rodis intently and said, "Do you know that the historical process is like a pendulum swinging back and forth, passing the peaks of opposites and a deep decline? With our victory, the pendulum will swing to the peak of economic intensity of life, and then, but this is not true, the factual course of history is different. The pendulum is nothing more than an image invented by people of single-line thinking who do not know dialectics. The image was born out of suffering among the masses of people under the conditions of minor changes in the system of governance, without a roots-level transformation. After all, nothing will change if one accepts a doctrine opposite to the previous one, rebuilds psychology, and adapts. Time will pass, everything will collapse, causing innumerable woes. Your economists do not know how to predict and defend against the qualitative natural pulsation of life. The mission of man is to eliminate this pendulous suffering. Let us leave aside distant consequences. Surely an increase in entertainment, amusement would alone be a valuable achievement for the people? Emphatically, it would not. The rift between a life of poverty and entertainment will become the more terrible, the stronger the illusion. The impoverishment and narrowing of the individual and social life of a person are increasingly at odds with those unreal visions with which he is beguiled. Artificial greatness, tension, fullness of feelings, and illusions cause a splitting of the psyche between the spectral world and the reality of life. So you do not believe in us, do not consider the coup d'état necessary? Yes. I have heard only empty words. Ye and your accomplices have no knowledge, no program has been developed, and the situation has not been studied. Ye do not know where to start, what to strive for, except for a hierarchical reset in the highest class of Yanyah." The serpent-bearer stood up with a stone face. Making an effort in himself, he said that there was yet one request which, he hoped, the Earthlings would not refuse. Inform our doctors about measures to prolong life, how ye achieve your strength and beauty, and live twice as long as us. Why do ye need to know? What do you mean why? Cried the dignitary. Everything should have a purpose and a meaning. A long life is needed for those who are spiritually richer, who can give a lot to people, and if this is not the case, then for what? There are millions of ye who do not care about anything except yourselves, your privileges, indifferent parasites, without conscience, morality, duty. Ye shun your direct responsibilities and at the same time take for yourself hundreds of times more than any other member of society here is given. What convictions allow ye to act after the fashion of plunderers, completing the work of your foolish predecessors, who depleted the resources of the planet and humanity of Yanyach? Are ye not dizzied when ye look into the huge chasm between ye and the people? The serpent-bearer made an indistinct noise, clenched his fists, stamped his foot, and suddenly rushed to the exit. Stand! The unusually harsh and irresistibly imperious order of the earthly woman chained him to his place. Complying, he stared obediently at Rodis. With an imperceptibly rapid movement, typical for Earthlings, she ran her hands over his clothes, found a heavy box in an inner pocket on his chest, and returned to the SDP. A light click, and all entries were erased. And Rodis returned the box. All this time the dignitary stood like a pillar, repeating aloud, I remember nothing at all, without sensing that the memory of the conversation that had taken place was being erased in his head. Fay Rodis, with her natural abilities, did not need an SMI. The serpent-bearer walked to the door, bowed, and disappeared. Rodis turned off the sound protection, and immediately the ringing tones of a call sounded. The image of Iviza appeared, worked up and even more lovely from it. Chetty is badly injured, with shattered bones. She is in my hospital. Iviza listed the medicines and instruments needed from the Dark Flame, and said that she and Noreen would now go to the city chief to warn him about the automatic disc plane being sent from the Dark Flame and to arrange a landing site. Is Chetty conscious? Asleep. I am coming. Rodis showed the side of her hand, signal of end of communication, and switched the SDP over to the beacon of the ship. Veer, Noreen, and Iviza came to the city chief in a large house on a hill near the central hospital. Hundreds of people scurried along the dark, high corridors, into which many massive doors opened. The almighty cards provided their own effect. Both Earthlings were taken to the chief, to even the secretaries of whom ordinary Sholi and Loli of the capital got only after several months of waiting. A huge room with a gigantic table emphasized the significance of the dignitary, large, sleek, and immensely important, sitting in a deep armchair. He got up with a noticeable labor, bowed, and flopped down again in his seat, silently pointing Veer and Iviza to the seats in front of the table. Veer Noreen summarized the request in a few words. There followed a long silence. The dignitary flipped through some papers lying in front of him, looked up, and the Earthlings noted the familiar, stupid arrogance that made all the serpent-bearers alike. The case is special. No automatic engine has ever been shot over the city. I cannot resolve it. But urgent deliveries of this kind have been practiced on Earth for thousands of years. It's completely safe, assured Veer Noreen. And if suddenly something goes bad, suddenly the disc falls into the residence of important persons. Understand, this cannot happen. All the same, there is no such thing in the regulations. The Council of the Four must be requested. So request. This is about the life of a person. The serpent-bearer became frightened and indignant, as if an insult had been inflicted through his person on the supreme power. Even if I dare to make use of the direct link to report, all the same, getting permission right away is impossible. And I'm not sure if the decision will be positive. Iviza jumped up, her eyes sparkling. Veer Noreen also stood up. They looked at each other and suddenly laughed. Is it true that high-ranking officials are preordained to make responsible decisions? Iviza asked softly. Only so. In the laws, there is nothing that permits the sending of an automatic machine. But there is nothing prohibiting this either, is there? The serpent-bearer expressed some confusion, but quickly recovered. It is not provided by the laws. Therefore, it is not allowed. Ye were appointed precisely to deal with unforeseen situations, Otherwise, why are ye here?" "I am here to observe the interests of the state," arrogantly said the serpent-bearer. Viernorin put his hand on Evisa's shoulder. "Let us not waste time. This is nothing more than a narrowly programmed robot. A simple sound recording would be enough for his function." The dignitary rose menacingly. The astronavigator held out his hand, palm forward. "To your place! Sleep! Forget!" The serpent-bearer fell into a chair, eyes closed and head hanging to one side. Evisa and Viernorin left the office, telling the two female secretaries that the dignitary was talking to the Council of the Four. The sacred fear on the faces of the secretaries said that the head of the city would sleep well. To plant an unmanned discoid without any regulations there, Viernorin decided. Teo will find a place. The machine will take as much load as they manage to fill, and for Teo too. Quickly to the SDP, Rodis made an arrangement with Rift, and Teo is already near her. Teo and his friends set up a homing beacon in a dry garden about a kilometer from the central hospital. The robot disc covered the distance between the starship and the city of the Center of Wisdom in 17 minutes. Evisa and Viernorin, taking what they needed, rushed to the hospital, and Teo's group remained to unload the materials and devices sent for them. Griff Rift promised to send one more disc at night and gave instructions on how to control the machine. The Tormanzians could hide the robot in a safe place or submerge it in the ocean. Chitty was brought to the hospital unconscious. First, she was put in a corridor filled with bunks. The doctor on duty did not believe the statements of the Lilacs, unfortunately, the very lowest rank, and only laughed in response to assurances that this girl had flown from Earth. Her appearance at night, in ordinary Sholi clothing, and wounded in a street fight besides, seemed too incredible. The last doubt that arose when examining her wonderfully perfect body was dispelled as soon as Chidi, in oblivion, fluently uttered a few words with good Yan-Yak language, with the resonant accent of the tail hemisphere. The doctor defined the damage as fatal. He did not consider himself able to save the girl. It was not worth tormenting her in vain, bringing her out of the blissful shock. And the surgeon waved his hand, not knowing that at that very moment, the eye of the Lord was giving the order to at all costs find Evisa Tanit. The strong will of Chetty helped her emerge from the red sea of pain and weakness that flooded her mind. She was lying naked, covered with a yellow cloth, on a narrow iron bed, under the harsh light of an uncovered vacuum tube. These eye-cutting lamps were found on Tormance in all office buildings and in Sholi dwellings. Here in the hospital, the harsh light seemed unbearable, but none of the moaning, delirious prostrate on the neighboring beds paid attention to it. During the night, the patients were not visited by nurses, medical attendants, or doctors. People spent the long night of Tormance alone with their misery, too weak to rise or speak to one another. Chitty realized that she would die, left to her own fate. Overcoming incredible pain and spinning in her brain, Chitty got up, taking her legs off the bed, and again lost consciousness. A piercing needle prick brought her to herself. Opening her eyes, Chitty saw, burning with perturbation directly above her, the face of Evisa. Accompanied by the doctor on duty, wrangling from fright for his mistake, Chitty was taken to the vacant operating room. Evisa, having made sure that the immediate danger had subsided, contacted Rodis and Viernorin. The following matters, including a fruitless conversation with the serpent-bearer, took more than 2 hours. Chetty slept in the operating room. When Evisa came tearing in like the wind, carrying a bag with the necessary medicine on her shoulder, the entire medical staff of the hospital was already assembled. A minute later, Viernorin came running, loaded with 2 large, tightly rolled bales. The chief surgeon walked nervously in front of the operating room doors, escaping from his office, where ZUG and General Shi alternately appeared on the big screen, demanding information about the earthly guest. Having been alerted by Tal, Evisa said nothing about the help sent from the starship. In the hospital, it was thought that she was running to get medicine, perhaps from home, perhaps from a comrade. After disinfecting, Evisa had time to rest and immediately took up the operation. The surgeons of Tormance saw the strange technique of the earthly doctor. Evisa boldly splayed all the affected areas with longitudinal cuts, carefully avoiding damaging not only the smallest nerve branches, but also the lymphatic vessels. She fastened the broken bones down to small fragments, with some kind of red hooks, isolated the main blood vessels, cut them, and attached a small pulsating apparatus to them. Then the entire operating field was 5 times permeated with OMN, a solution for the high-speed regeneration of bones, muscles, nerves. The cuts were connected with black hooks. A second device appeared for massaging the edges of wounds and at the same time rubbing in a thick liquid of skin regeneration senior. Immediately, Eviza woke Chedi, abundantly feeding her with some milk-like emulsion. Vir Noreen, dressed as a brother of mercy, lifted Chedi off the operating table with infinite care. The Earthlings now did not care about the observance of Tormansian decency, not trusting the sterility of the sheets. The astronavigator carried a completely naked Chedi in his outstretched arms into the small room assigned to her. There he placed her on a bed made of a special fabric, sparkling with silver, and covered it with a transparent light hood, which had been pre-stretched over the frame. The ash-blue non-apet of Chedi was already standing next to the bed. A multi-cylinder apparatus was connected to it with a system of tubes fixed at the ends in the hood. Eviza Tanit, resting, stretched out on a firm sofa, leaning slightly on her left arm and throwing her bent right arm over her head. She glanced at the bar of indicators at her head, with wires attached to Chedi's temples, neck, chest, and wrists. Vir Noreen glanced gratefully at Eviza, firmly shook the elbow of her strong arm, protruding from beneath the thick curly hair of her nape, and walked towards the exit, carefully stepping along the floor, still damp from disinfection. The astronavigator had not managed to leave the enormous building of the hospital when a man in a crumpled and washed-out yellow visitor's robe entered the room with the sleeping Chedi and the half-asleep Eviza, with an obliquely bandaged face. Eviza jumped up and threw herself on his neck. "Rodis, I came to replace ye," and Rodis ran her fingers over Eviza's sunken cheek. Eviza squinted like a child with soap in her eyes and fiercely shook her head. "Not now. The nervous tension will pass, and I will be calm. I will unburden ye. Lie down. I haven't spoken to ye for so long, even via SDP. Were ye allowed to leave for long?" Rodis laughed like a girl, ringing and carefree. "Nobody allowed, as with the landing of the discoid. If I had begun to request leave, they would not have solved the great question even tomorrow. And I will be here with ye as long as ye need it. And this disguise? The work of Tail and his friends." Rodis donned a pearl-silver spiderweb of earthly medical clothes over the black Tormansian ones. "Where is your SDP, Rodis?" "Deactivated. It will be brought in at night and released at the entrance to this building. I'll call it here. Well, lie down and I will walk the room, unburdening excitement of a different kind. It has been a long time since I felt such joy from a long walk as today. It seems like forever I have been living in cramped conditions, natural on a ship, and unnecessarily forced on Tormance." Chedi also could not get used to such a life. Her long walks were rewarding for getting to know people and customs, but in the end they led to disaster, Eviza said. "What caused the attack?" She hasn't been able to say anything yet. The attacker on Chedi immediately committed suicide. It is hardly likely that she knows about it. Rodis thought about it and said, "The cause is the absence of sexual upbringing, which gave rise to the arrow of Ahriman. By the way, I heard about your lecture on the erotica of Earth. Ye suffered failure even with doctors, and they should have been educated in this regard." "Yes, it is a pity," said Eviza, saddening. "I wanted to show them the power over desire, not leading to the loss of sexual sensations, but on the contrary, to the heights of passion. How much brighter and stronger she is, if one doesn't drag on her leash. But what can be done if, as Chedi told me, they have only one word for love, for physical connection, and a dozen more words that are considered abuse? And this is about love, for which there are a multitude of words in the language of the earth. I do not know how many." "More than 500, Rodis answered without hesitation. 300 marking the shades of passion, and about 1,500 describing human beauty. But here in the books of Tormance I have not found anything except wretched attempts to describe, for example, their beautiful beloved with their poor language. Everything turns out to be similar, poetry is lost, sensations are dulled by monotonous repetitions. The oligarchs, of course, through their educated henchmen, desperately fight to hide people's spiritual abilities from them, and the great forces of human nature connected with this. In exactly the same way, they try to belittle and devalue physical beauty, so that an ordinary person could in no way consider himself better or superior to the rulers. Their scientist servants are always ready to belie, denying spiritual powers and ridiculing beauty. In the ancient times of Europe and the Middle East, medieval India, Rodis continued, physical love was intertwined with religion, philosophy, and rituals. Then came the reaction, the Dark Ages, exaltation of religion and rejection, suppression of sexuality. A new reaction, and in the EDW, with the withering away of religiosity, primitive erotica was revived on a weaker physical basis. It did not bring about, as in the old days, a powerful ascension of feelings. This period, the last in the existence of capitalist relations in the societies of Earth, was additionally characterized as utilitarianism. Erotica, politics, and science, everything was considered from the point of view of material benefits and money. Utilitarianism invariably led to the limitation of sensations, and not just of thinking. This is why the Tormansians first need to restore a normal sense of the world. Only then will they be capable of genuine erotica. Ye acted too quickly, Iviza. But enough of that. Rodis began to run her fingers over Iviza's body, pressing certain points and saying measured musical words. Less than a few minutes later, Iviza slept with childlike serenity. The wrinkles of chagrin were hidden only in the corners of the lips, but soon they too disappeared. Then Rodis knelt and, bending back, her head touched the floor, straightening her back. Her companions belonged to the age when forces are quickly restored in sound and healthy sleep. Rodis admired both of them and was happy. They had done what they could to study Tormance and, naturally, were unable to change the life here. They would now return to the dark flame. For the nuggets that Iviza and Chetty would have added to the gigantic task of turning the history of Tormance, it was no longer worth risking their lives. The anthropologist Chetty and Starfleet physician Iviza would still visit different places in the universe, give to the Earth their children, live long, interesting lives. The immeasurable humiliation of man on Tormance and the suffering endured here, the longing and pity borne for their brothers, would be erased, softened, and eventually cease to disturb them on Earth. The door slowly opened. The SDP entered and stood motionless at the feet of Rodis. She removed the heavy white drum from its dome and, with some effort placing it on the window, screwed a blue case into a special protrusion of the upper edge. Among Iviza's equipment, Rodis found a tall glass, transparent to the point of invisibility, and, turning the cone, poured an equally transparent liquid into the vessel. Rodis sipped it carefully, her face lighting up with pleasure. After the mineralized, unclean, smelling of rusty plumbing and cheap bactericidal water of the capital, the taste of earthly water was indescribably pleasant. Nea Hawley had also not forgotten to send in concentrated nourishment from the starship. Rodis began to prepare food for Chetty and Iviza. The chief doctor, pale and sweaty, hastily entered the room. I did not suspect that I had here the mistress of the Earthlings, he bowed to Rodis. You're uncomfortable and cramped. But we'll sort this out later now, though. Let us go to my office. Ye are called from the gardens of Zoan. It seems the face of the chief took a begging expression. The great and the wise himself wants to talk to ye. Fay Rodis appeared in front of the screen of two-way communication of Yan-Yak, on which the familiar figure of the Lord soon manifested. Choyo Chagas was darksome. A sharp gesture in the direction of the chief doctor, and he, bending low, rushed out of the office. Choyo Chagas looked at Rodis in her silver dressing gown, through which the costume of a simple woman, Yan-Yak, shone. Less striking than your former clothing. But in this way ye seem closer, ye seem to be my subject, he said, with deliberated emphasis. And yet I am surprised to learn that ye are here. If it hadn't been for the catastrophe with Chetty, I would not have left the repositories. There are very interesting materials, and ye acted wisely in sending me there. Choyo Chagas softened slightly. I hope that ye are convinced once again of how unsafe it is to communicate with our wild and evil people. Our fourth guest almost died. Fay Rodis wanted to ask who was responsible for the people of Yan-Yak being in such a state, but to irritate the Lord was not included in her plans. What do ye intend to do now? Asked Choyo Chagas. As soon as our anthropologist recovers, I will send her and the doctor to the starship. Now this is a question of a few days. And further, I will return to the repository of history. I will finish work on the manuscripts. Our astronavigator will continue his acquaintance with the scientific world of the capital. Another 20 days, and we will say goodbye to ye. And the second starship, It should be close. But we will not abuse your hospitality. Likely it will not land, but remain in orbit until our departure. The Lord, it seemed to Rodis, experienced pleasure. Good. They will set ye up here in the best possible way. No need to worry. Better to issue the order that we be connected with you or the junior lords without delay. Otherwise, we will not be able to figure out where your will ends and the dimness and fear of dignitaries begin. Choyo Chagas nodded graciously. For a while he silently regarded Rodis, and then, without saying a word, suddenly disappeared from the screen. She returned to Chetty, already sitting in pillows and without the hood. Both Chetty and Iviza were enjoying the water and food from Earth, eyes tight with pleasure. I never imagined that conserved Earth food would actually be so delicious, Chetty said. After the Tormanzian food, Rhoda said, plunging her fingers into the girl's thick hair, which had once again returned to its natural ash-golden color. The eyes, freed from contact lenses, shone the same blue. I'm surprised. Chetty raised herself to an elbow, but Iviza immediately set her in place. How can they poison themselves, their children, ruin their future, falsifying and cheapening food so that it becomes toxic? Imagine that on Earth, someone began to take such a poison. Senseless! They, said Rodis, in this horrifying way, increase the amount of food, making it cheaper to produce. And they sell it at the same high price. This is called an indirect tax in the Tormance society, and the income goes to the oligarchs. I am sure that not a single laboratory here will undertake to analyze the composition of products so that the truth of its harmfulness leaks out, said Iviza. We must take samples with us to Earth. Excellent idea, Rodis said. Let's begin right away then with the hospital. Rodis for a long time, without haste, massaged the scars of healed incisions with traces of dissolved black hooks on Chetty's shoulder. Chetty insisted that she was completely healthy, but Rodis and Iviza were afraid of the consequences of internal injuries. Books of entertainment were brought on a small cart. Chetty began to devour one after another at a speed incomprehensible to the Tormanzians, but most common for Earthlings, who instantly perceived entire pages. By the time Iviza arrived, a mountain of books had grown near Chetty's bed. Is it really so interesting? Iviza asked. I was looking for something worthwhile. I could not have believed that in a technically advanced civilization it was possible to write such trifles, similar to the earthly literature of the EDW. As if they have no spiritual problems, worries, diseases, unhappiness. True great tragedies, magnificent human heroism, hidden in the gray everyday life, do not interest them. Apparently, the person himself is not interesting to them and serves only as a background. It all comes down to temporary stupidity, accidental misunderstanding, or Philistine discontent. The writers here have cleverly learned to distract and entertain by retelling hundreds of times one and the same thing. They also write for television programs, praising the happiness of life under the wise leadership of Choyo Chagas, who supposedly saved them from a malign past. Here history begins with the establishment of the all-planetary power of the theorist of the oligarchy, the great Inokao. The impression is that the books are written for mentally undeveloped children. All books are new, little read. We must request some older editions. Iviza took herself to the library, rummaged there for a long time, talked to the librarian, and returned in bewilderment. When Choyo Chagas became the Lord, Iviza said, under the threat of severe punishment, old books were removed from all the libraries of the planet, tied in nets with stones and drowned in the sea. Single copies were transferred to special repositories, where they can neither be read nor copied. Forbidden to everyone except special proxies. What a crime against man, Rodis said sternly. Oh, ye don't even know the half of it yet, Chetty said. Here exists a monstrous system of filtration. In every house of spectacles, on television and radio, there sits the eyes of the Lord. They have the right to stop any spectacle, shut down the entire network, if someone tries to transmit what is not permitted. One could be killed for singing unauthorized songs. The eyes of the Lord have a list of what can be performed and what is forbidden. And so it is with everything. So sorry for these poor people, the voice of Chetty faded. Rodis and Iviza exchanged glances, and Rodis sat down at Chetty's headboard, humming and sliding the tips of her fingers over her forehead and face. Blue eyes, glistening with tears, closed. Another minute, and the girl fell into a deep, restful sleep. And now let's go around the hospital, Eviza suggested. The time is late. The doctors have dispersed. I brought a fresh robe. Fay Rodis donned the yellow robe with a matching hat, and both earthly women stepped out into the harsh light of the bedline corridor. They could never forget the 4 nights they spent on voluntary rounds of the surgical department of the Central Hospital of the capital. Rodis made discovery after discovery. The sufferers were given almost no pain medication. Tormancian medicine did not create analgesics that were not part of the metabolism of the organism and did not cause addiction, narcomania. Powerful remedies like hypnotic massage and autogenous suggestion were not at all employed. Doctors did not pay attention to heartache and fear of death, and the tiresome pain of fractures was considered inevitable. To eliminate unnecessary suffering was, in essence, a trifle, hastening the healing of some, facilitating the last days of others. Against the loneliness of the sick, their endless nights of suffering in unventilated wards, no struggle was conducted. The hospital was dominated by women, more tenacious than men. They lay for months. It was explained to the earthlings that the wives and mothers of the lolly were saved because men without them had nervous breakdowns and, bribing officials, they made their way into the palaces of gentle death, destroying, in themselves, specialists needed by the state. The loss of the dignity of death in such hospitals represented the natural dialectical paradox of a planet where death had been made a public duty for the majority. All the more desperately did the lolly cling to life in overcrowded hospitals. Rodis recalled with a smile her infernal ordeals. Here she had descended to much lower circles of inferno, and Eviza for the 100th time mentally agreed with the leader of the 6 Sholi. They really did die healthy, not knowing the pitiful struggle for life in filth and pain. Fay Rodis moved from one bed to another, sitting down on the edges, quieting the pain with hypnosis, calming with songs, teaching them to inspire a dream in themselves and entertain themselves with their imagination. Eviza, who did not possess such psychic strength, performed healing massages of the nerves. Arriving in the morning in Chetty's ward, both, exhausted, fell down and fell asleep, having drained their nervous strength. A rumor about an extraordinary woman instantly spread throughout the hospital. Now Fay Rodis, like a goddess, was greeted from all sides by prayers and outstretched hands. The surrounding grief fell on her, pressing, depriving her of her former inner freedom. For the first time, Rodis realized how far she still was from true spiritual perfection. As a consequence of the insignificance of her forces in the ocean of grief, pity inevitably arose, deviating from the main objective. Her help here did not correspond to the task that henceforth lay on the people of the earth, helping the people of Yanyak in the destruction of the infernal social system entirely and forever. After 4 days in the hospital, Fay Rodis again walked across the creaky floors of the Temple of Time, accompanied by her friends and all 3 SDPs. 2 of them carried the still weak Chetty in a springy hammock suspended from support posts. The immensely delighted Teo met them at the gate, and even the guards, this time selected from specially trained people, softened at the sight of the blue eyes of Chetty, absorbing the surroundings with the delight of the convalescent. Chetty's joy was short-lived. Upon learning of her return to the starship, Chetty became strongly upset, and Fay Rodis had a hard time convincing her of such a necessity. Anxiety prompted Eviza to demand that she be left here in case of illness of Rodis or Vir Noreen. "My health is excellent," argued Rodis, "and I can heal by suggestion better than any of ye." "And Vir? He, it seems to me, has fallen ill, but so that a doctor, even a Starfleet doctor, is not needed." "Really? Our experienced astronavigator? Ye joke? I wish I was. But this is madness, and ye are so calm." "The madness is no more than Chetty's life among the Sholi, than your work in the hospital, than all the ideas that compelled us to meddle in the being of an inhospitable, tortured planet. Rodis, are ye thinking about something dangerous? I will not leave ye." "Ye will." Rodis drew Eviza to her, and her raven-colored hair for a second intertwined with the auburn locks of Eviza. All 3 women took a walk along the masked dungeon at the Shrine of the 3 Steps. "Here we will store your SDP," said Rodis, referring to Eviza. "Its green-gray color with a silvery sheen greatly harmonizes with the black tables and benches." "And mine?" asked Chetty, who had grown fond of the ash-blue non-aped. "Ye will gift yours to Tail and teach him how to use it." "And with us it will shine with a green light?" "Yes." I'll take Avisa's bracelet, but I'll turn off its direct link to the dark flame once you are safe behind the walls of the ship. Behind the walls of the ship, repeated Avisa. Maybe it is shameful for a real researcher, but I will be happy. How much better to live on the ship, carrying out expeditions from there to an alien world, than to be, like us, torn from the dark flame, carried by the currents of a strange life, in which it seems that everyone has conspired to harm themselves and others, to create grief and misfortune everywhere, even in those places where there is no reason for misery. Rodis and Noreen escorted the young women to the hulking, dust-covered and unruly car. Chetty embraced Rodis tightly, kissed the astronavigator, and then knelt down and stroked her SDP. The two Earthlings and the Tormancean engineer stood on the balcony of the fifth temple. The car left along the upper bypass road. The column of dust was visible above the city for a long time after. Tail had already learned to recognize the mood of his seemingly imperturbable earthly friends. And now, observing the calm faces staring into the distance, the engineer decided to distract Rodis and Noreen from their thoughts. "I have not yet thanked ye for the precious gift," he said, pointing to the SDP. "We do not give thanks for gifts. The greatest joy of a person on earth is to give. It is us who should thank ye," Rodis said. For some reason, Tail was embarrassed and shifted the conversation. "I was always intrigued by the number of legs of the SDP. Why 9, why odd, and not two-sided symmetry 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 0? The question is not so simple," answered Noreen. "Above bilateral symmetry, there is a triad. Helicoid oddness is higher than the two-way equilibrium of opposites, which is usually used on Earth and corresponds to the surface structure of the surrounding world. 579 give a special advantage in overcoming contradictions in binary systems and stability in a bilaterally conflicting world, that is, the ability to cross insurmountable obstacles. Oddness greater than 1 is a way out of the infernal struggle of opposites, an opportunity to avoid the dialectical swing from right to left, up and down. In nature, these are multi-axis phase systems, or three-phase current, for example. Oddness as a property was noticed in ancient times. 3, 5, 7, 9 were considered lucky and magic numbers. And we use the technique of oblique or helicoidal incisions into equilibrium systems of opposite forces." Tail shook his head. "All that I understood was the existence of mechanisms that operate on principles more complex than internal contradictions. And these mechanisms, so to speak, stand above the forces of the dialectically constructed world. They are more powerful, if ye like, than so. In ordinary life on Earth, we do not need the SDP. Robot satellites accompany us only on difficult expeditions to unknown distant worlds. In this they are irreplaceable. And in the mal-arranged world too, they are irreplaceable," added Tail. A shadow of alarm passed over Veer Noreen's face, making him look like a Tormancean. "Do ye have to go, Veer?" said Rodis, embracing his neck and looking into his eyes. "Ye are awaited. Something disquiets ye." "Yes, something unexperienced has come, and it has given rise to anxiety. Because we are on Tormance, where nothing is ever fulfilled. What next then, Veer?" "I do not know. I have to figure it out in myself, but the days fly by. Yes, time is so short, Veer, my good one." The voice of Rodis softened with tenderness. The astronavigator ran down the stairs and swept past the startled guards. Fay Rodis stood, resting her fingertips on the balcony railing, in deep thought, and therefore Tail, without saying goodbye, left and took the non-apt into the dungeon. Rodis, without lowering her gaze, looked out for a long time over the distant bare mountains, which stood in a purple haze. Still, so sharp in memory was the catastrophe in the city of Kinlante, the complications with Chetty had just ended, and now something else was approaching. And this time, she, Rodis, did not know the path to a solution. What awaited Veer and his beloved, apart from victims on both sides? And why had this fallen on Veer Noreen, who on his ships had penetrated the galaxy in multiple directions, on a man of such a clear mind and encyclopedic knowledge? Although, according to the laws of sudden turns, this may be natural at insurmountable obstacles? Coming back to herself from her thoughts, she saw that dusk had come. Fay Rodis went to her rooms. Even before the first door, Rodis felt the presence of someone familiar by previous feeling. Leaving, She did not alert the non-APED and now, not igniting the light, activated it. Barely audibly, her bracelet rang out, signaling a change in the air of the room. The non-APED lit a minute pink eye. Rodis saw the tightly shut bedroom door. Someone lying in wait hid in the first room. The door had been left ajar for a reason. Rodis opened the door, and a subtle smell penetrated her nostrils. It was so faint that, without tuning in ahead of time, she might not have felt it. Suddenly, something intoxicating consciousness hit. A dark force, like a coiled spring, began to unfold inside Rodis. She was seized by a wild desire to howl, laugh, roll on the floor. The mighty will of Rodis coped with the first blow of the poison. She stepped back to the SDP, removing from it biofilters, which she inserted into her nose. Now was the time to think. Still with a dull consciousness, she found the drug T-930 seconds, a universal antidote for all pathogens of the thalamus. Even without being a doctor, Rodis determined that a substance had been sprayed into the room that suppressed consciousness, releasing the basal primitive reflexes of the thalamic group and the tubercinarium of the brain. The antidote helped. How good that she had foreseen the possibility of using such substances, preparing for the landing on Tormance. Having regained the previous clarity of thought and vision, Rodis ordered the SDP to illuminate the room and abruptly tore aside the heavy curtain that covered the window niche. There, cowering like a cat, Efremov was hiding. A transparent mask with a small gas cylinder under the jaw covered the face of the beauty, who precipitously jumped at Rodis. Her deep-set eyes looked at Fay Rodis with expectation and surprise, asking, "Why aren't you falling?" In her hand, the lover of Treochagas held a complex device that was used on Tormance for filming. Efremov reached with her free hand into a wide belt that undoubtedly concealed a weapon. "Cease," Rodis ordered her. "Speak. Why did you do it?" Nailed to the spot, the beauty froze and swayed with all her slender body, as if she felt a desire to reincarnate as the snake, so beloved to the planet. "I wanted," she said with strain through gritted teeth, "to expose your real self, to show you. And you, sprawled, languishing with bestial desires, I planned to film and show it to the Lord." Efremov raised the apparatus. "He thinks too much of you. He praises you too much." "Let him see." Fay Rodis looked into a beautiful face twisted with malice. The combination of a low soul and a perfect body had always amazed people sensitive to beauty, and Rodis was no exception. "On Earth," she finally spoke up, "we believe that every unworthy action must be immediately counterbalanced by opposition. Take off your mask." The respirator could not hide the animal horror of the woman. She had to submit to an irresistible will. A minute later, Efremov was lying on the floor, her head thrown back, her eyes closed and her teeth bared, experiencing that which she had wanted to summon forth in Rodis. "Younger, younger! I want you, even more than ever! Hurry, younger!" Efremov suddenly bawled. In response to her call, the door immediately opened, and the head of the Lilacs himself appeared on the threshold. "On guard here somewhere," Rodis guessed instantly. Realizing the collapse of the contrivance and the exposure of their secrets, Yangar drew his weapon. But no matter how good a shot he was, he could not compete with Fay Rodis in reaction speed. She managed to activate the protective field. Both bullets sent in her direction, her stomach and her head, deflected, hit Yangar in the nose and between the collarbones. Yangar's gaze, aimed at Rodis, slowly faded, blood flooded his face. He fell with his back against the wall, slid along it and fell on his side 2 meters from his mistress. The shots had, without a doubt, echoed throughout the temple. It was necessary to act without delay. Rodis dragged Efremov into the bedroom, closed the door, flung open both windows. Then she unclenched the woman's teeth and poured in medicine. Efremov's convulsive movements ceased. A little more, and the woman opened her eyes, stood up staggering. "It seems." "Aye," she managed hoarsely. "Yes, ye have committed all that you expected from me." And suddenly the anger on her face was erased by fear, open, undivided, and pitiful fear. "And the camera? And Yangar? There." Rodis pointed to the door to the next room. "Yangar is killed." "Who killed him? Ye?" Rodis shook her head. "He himself, with his own bullets." "And ye know everything? If ye are talking about your relationship with him, then yes." Efremov fell at Rodis's feet. "Have mercy! The Lord will not forgive, he will not bear such humiliation. This, I understand. People like him cannot tolerate competition. His revenge is unimaginable. Sophisticated executioners know how to torture terribly, like your Yangar. The beautiful Tormanzian woman bowed her head, begging for mercy. Rodis went into the next room and returned a moment later with the camera. I'm returning, she said, holding out her hand, for the remainder of the poison. Startled, Ervobia hastily handed over the tiny spray bottle. Now, leave. Through the first window in the gallery, duck down behind the balustrade. Ye will reach the side stairs of the rear facade, go down to the garden. I hope ye have your lord's card. Ervobia stood silently before Rodis in dumbfounded amazement. And don't be afraid of anything. No one on the planet will know your secret. The Tormancian woman continued to stand, tried to say something, and could not. Rodis touched her gently with her fingers. Run, don't stand! I also have to go. Rodis turned, heard behind her the strange sobbing of Ervobia, and left. In the first room, in front of the protective wall of the SDP, guards led by an officer had crowded, and the body of Yangar lay in the corner. Apparently, after the conversation with Rodis in the hospital, the Lord of the Planet had ordered immediate connection, since he right away appeared on the improvised screen of the SDP. The guards immediately fled. Rodis said Yangar had shot at her. Troyo Chagas was already familiar enough with the operation of the protective screens to understand what had followed. However, the Lord was not at all upset by the death of the chief of his personal guard and the first assistant of Genshi for state security. Moreover, he seemed to be even pleased. Rodis had no time to ponder such a complex relationship. She feared that after the death of Yangar, she would be removed from the temple. For the sake of safety, the Lord suggested that she move to the palace again, but she politely refused, referring to the allegedly unchecked materials that were picturesquely piled up in 3 rooms, prepared by Teao. When will ye finish your work? Troyo Chagas asked cautiously. As agreed, in 3 weeks. Oh yes, ye must stay with me for a few days before leaving. I would like to use your knowledge once again. Ye can use the knowledge of the whole earth. That is exactly what I don't want. Ye offer the general, but I need the particular. I'm ready to help in the particular too. Well, remember my invitation. Now I will leave ye. Answer only one question. What do ye know about the people who in the old days on earth were called the bourgeoisie? I came across such a strange word today. This was the name of an entire strata, and then for some reason this definition was passed on to people who only know how to take, without giving anything. Moreover, they take to the detriment of others, nature, the entire planet. With them, there was no limit to greed. The lack of self-restraint violated the inner harmony between the external world and human senses. People constantly went beyond their capabilities, trying to rise higher in social status and receive the associated privileges. All they received was a complex of severe inferiority, disappointment, envy, and anger. First of all, in this environment of immorality and nervous breakdowns, it was necessary to develop the teaching of self-education and social discipline. How this matches my dignitaries? Naturally. Why naturally? Greed and envy thrive and intensify under dictatorships, when traditions, laws, and social opinion do not exist. Anyone who only wants to take is always against these restraining forces. There is only one way to fight them, by destroying any privileges, and hence the oligarchy. The advice is good. Ye are true to yourself. That is why. The Lord pondered, as if he could not find the exact word, I am so attracted to ye. Probably because I am the only one telling ye the truth. If only it were that. Not so long ago with us there existed a chamber of conscience. There people would come to evaluate their actions, to ascertain their motives, or to find out what to do with the help of broad information, the just and clear minds of people with deep intuition. This proposal by Rodis was not pleasing to the Lord. Troyo Chagas made a farewell gesture and left. A few minutes later, the guards were diligently washing the floor in the place where the corpse of Yangar had just lain, and with superstitious fear looked back at Rodis, who walked through the rooms. She had to shut down the SDP, and she was wary of the excessive curiosity of the lilacs. The guards disappeared. In their place, out of breath, barely alive, Tail appeared. "My mistake! My stupidity!" he shouted, stopping in the doorway. Rodis calmly led him into the room and closed the door. She instinctively assimilated this precaution necessary for the inhabitant of Yanyak, and then told about what had happened. The Tormanzian calmed down a little. "I will now leave and return to the dungeon. We will be there waiting for ye. Don't forget, today is your big and important reception." Roguish wrinkles in a very earthly way flickered on the lips of the Tormanzian. "Ye intrigue me," Rodis said, smiling. The engineer became abashed, feeling that she was reading his mind, waved his hand and ran away. Locking the door and alerting, as usual, the SDP, Rodis descended into the dungeon. In the Shrine of the Three Steps, she was awaited by Tail, Gokten, and a stranger, with sharp features and light brown eyes, emitting a gaze of bird-like intensity. "I've understood," Rodis said before the engineer and architect introduced the visitor. "Are ye an artist?" "This makes our task easier," said Gokten, "if ye have understood that you have to be a symbol of the earth. Rai Bertin, or Ritten, is a sculptor and must fulfill the desire of many people to create your portrait. He is one of the best artists on the planet and works stunningly fast." "One of the worst," the sculptor said, in an unexpectedly high and cheerful voice. "In any case, in the opinion of those in charge of our art, is it possible to be in charge of art?" Rodis was surprised, but immediately added, "Yes, I forget that here, to be in charge means to protect the oligarchy from encroachments on its undivided power over spiritual life." "Difficult to say it better," exclaimed the sculptor. "But still, there are people who simply love art and help it. Those who know that even one rose adorns the whole garden. We are loved only by the beggars, and the serpent bearers are ignorant and are too utilitarian in their attitude towards everything. They support only minions from the arts who praise them. Real art is long labor. How much can one create if one spends one's whole life decorating palaces and gardens with sculptural gimcracks, but the works of real art, literature, architecture? For a person, this is a shield, protection by a dream that does not come true in the natural course of life. We call art not a shield, but milestones in the fight against Inferno," Rodis said. "Whatever one calls it, it is important that art brings solace, not entertainment, inspires heroism, and does not dose with soporifics, does not seek a cheap paradise, does not turn into a narcotic," said Ritten. "I remember how Archetti was struck by the almost complete absence of sculptures in the city, parks, and squares. Are they considered unnecessary? Not only. If the sculpture is not guarded or is not protected by an iron grating, it will be immediately disfigured, stained with inscriptions, or even smashed. Who would raise a hand to beauty? Really, people could offend a child, trample a flower, insult a woman? A child, and a flower, and a woman." All three Tormancians answered in unison. Rodis just threw up her hands. "The appearance of such people in a society of your type is apparently inevitable. But do ye know their percentage in relation to normal people? Is their number increasing or decreasing? This is the cardinal question." The Tormancians looked at each other wordlessly. I know, statistics are prohibited. And yet ye yourselves need to collect information, compare, break free of social blindness." Fay Rodis fell silent and suddenly laughed. "I become like the oligarchs and begin to give not advice, but how is it?" "Directions." The architect broke into a wide and kind smile. "Well then, let us begin, Ritten. Should I stand, sit, or walk?" The sculptor hesitated, sighed, not daring to say. Rodis guessed, but was in no hurry to come to his aid, looking at him sideways and expectantly. Ritten spoke out with difficulty. "You see, earthly people are different not only in face, posture, but also in body. The body of the earthling is special. It is by no means light, but nor does it seem heavy. With strength and mass, your body is very flexible and mobile. So ye want me to pose without clothes? If it is possible, only then will I create a complete portrait of the woman of the earth." The Tormancians did not even have time to come to their senses when Rodis turned out, even more distant and inaccessible in her proud nakedness. The architect, hands folded in prayer, looked at her. He immediately recalled the figures of the heroes, hidden by the masks of the dungeon. In regular garb, they would seem rude. With Rodis, it turned out the opposite. Dressed, she seemed smaller and thinner, and the lines of her body much sharper, more contrasting than those of the sculptures of her ancestors in the gallery. Tail froze, staring at the floor, and even covered his eyes with his palm. Suddenly, he turned and disappeared into the darkness of the gallery. "Unfortunate one, he loves ye." Abruptly, almost rudely, the sculptor let fly, not taking his eyes off Rodis. "Fortunate," objected Gacton. "Beware, you too will perish, but be silent," Ritten said imperiously. "Can ye dance?" He turned to Rodis. "Like any woman of earth. Then dance something so that the whole body is included in the dance, every muscle." The sculptor began at a frantic pace to sketch sketches on sheets of gray paper. Several minutes passed in silence. Then Ritten dropped his hands helplessly. "Impossible! Too fast, you move just as swiftly as you think. Do only endings, I will give a sign, and you freeze!" So things went smoother. At the end of the session, the sculptor began tying up a voluminous bundle of sketches. "Let us continue tomorrow. However, allow me, wait. You will talk with the angels, and I will also paint you sitting. I never thought that people of a higher civilization would be so strong. It's not only ye who is mistaken so. Many of our ancestors thought that the human of the future would become thin, fragile, and gentle. A transparent flower on a limber stem." "Ye guessed it precisely, even with the same words," cried the sculptor. "And how to live, overcoming, struggling with life, and at the same time enjoying it. On account of a machine? What kind of life is this? To become a mother, I have to, in constitution, be an amphora of a thinking life, otherwise I will cripple the child. In order to endure the burden of difficult matters, as only in them do you fully live, we must be strong, especially our men. In order to perceive the world in all its brilliance and depth, one must have keen senses." On the table of the chairman of the Council of the Four, I saw a symbolic sculpture. 3 monkeys. One covered its ears, the other covered its eyes with its paws, the third covered its mouth. So in contrast to this symbol of mystery and submissive behavior, a person is obliged to hear everything, see everything, and talk about everything. "When ye elucidate, everything falls into place," said the sculptor, "but it doesn't make it easier for me with your many-sided personage. I will make stucco sketches when I enter the image. A strange, unprecedentedly beautiful image, but not a stranger, and this makes it even more difficult. Understand me, this cannot be done right away. Do not persuade, I understand everything. And I will sit with ye again after everyone is gone. But before the gray angels appear, I need to know about the shrine of the 3 steps. Have ye discovered anything, Gacton? The shrine was created at the time of the foundation of the temple, when the religious cult of time was flourishing. Only those who passed the 3 stages of testing, or 3 stages of initiation, received access here. So I was not mistaken. This faith was brought to you from the earth. The belief that merit can be achieved once and for all, without long-term ministry and struggle. And here, for 2 millennia, they could not even achieve a balance between the forces of grief and joy. What trials are you talking about? Said the sculptor, his interest ignited. In any religion, there are trials before initiation into the highest, secret knowledge. They are three steps to individual greatness and power. As if there could exist some special force outside of relation with the rest of the surrounding world. The first trial, the so-called trial by fire, is the acquisition of endurance, higher courage, dignity, confidence in oneself, as if a process of burning away all that is bad in the soul. After trial by fire, it is still possible to turn back, become an ordinary person. After the next 2, the paths back are cut off. The one who has come through them will no longer be able to live an everyday life. And all this turned out to be superstitions? Asked the slightly stammering Tail who had appeared from the gallery. Far from all. We took a lot for psychological training. But the belief in the supreme being following a superior destiny was a naive relic of the caveman view of the world. Even worse, a relic of the religious fanaticism of the Dark Ages, which existed in parallel with the conviction that man and all the vicissitudes and catastrophes of the planet must be saved because he is man. God's creation. Believers in God forgot that even if God really existed, he would not encourage the absence of high spiritual qualities, aspirations, and dignity in his creation, the only one endowed with reason of self-cognition. The sum of the crimes of man, thrown on the scales of nature, fully ensured the death sentence for this unfortunate and arrogant creature. But on the other hand, the dialectics of the world is such that only man has the right to judge nature for too great a volume of suffering on the path to perfection. The enormous duration of the process of evolution has not yet been able to save the world from suffering, nor to find the right path to happiness. If a thinking creature does not do this, then an ocean of suffering will wallow on the planet until the complete death of all living things from cosmic causes, the extinction of a star, the explosion of a supernova, that is, for billions of years more. 8 people entered the dungeon, looking around with faces severe even for unsmiling Tormanzians, in dark blue cloaks loosely draped over their shoulders. The architect wanted to take them to Rodis, but the one in front casually pushed Gakden aside. "Are you the mistress of the earthly visitors? We have come to thank ye for the devices that we have dreamed of for millennia. For many centuries we have been hiding and inactive, and now we can return to the struggle." Fay Rodis looked at the hard faces of the newcomers. They breathed with will and intellect. They did not wear any adornments or signs. Their clothes, with the exception of their cloaks, which were obviously worn for night wandering, did not differ in any way from the usual clothes of the average lolly. Only each had a wide ring of platinum on the thumb of his right hand. "Poison?" Rodis asked the leader, gesturing to sit down and pointing to the ring. The man raised an eyebrow, just like Choyo Chaga's, and a hard grin barely touched his lips. "The last handshake of death is for those on whom our choice will fall." "Where did the name of your society come from?" Rodis asked. "Unknown. There are no legends on this account. So we were called from the very foundation, that is, from the moment of our appearance on the planet Yanyok, from the white stars, or from the earth, as you assert." "I knew it. The name of your society is deeper in meaning and much older than you think. In the Dark Ages on Earth, a legend was born about the great battle between God and Satan, good and evil, heaven and hell. White angels fought on the side of God, black angels on the side of Satan. The whole world was split in two until Satan with his black army was defeated and cast into hell. There were angels though, not white and not black, but gray, who remained on their own, not obeying anyone and not fighting on anyone's side. They were rejected by heaven and not accepted by hell, and from that time they remained forever between heaven and hell, that is, on earth. The sullen visitors listened with lighted eyes. They liked the legend. The name Grey Angels was adopted by a secret society that fought against the atrocities of the Inquisition in the Dark Ages, equally against the evil of the black servants of the Lord and the non-interference indifference of the good whites. I think that ye are the heirs of your earthly brothers." "Stunning," said the leader of the Grey Angels. "It gives us even more confidence." "In what?" Fay Rodis asked, with unexpected sharpness. "In the need for terror? In the transition from single actions to the mass extermination of harm-bearing people who have been extraordinarily multiplying recently. It is not possible to destroy evil mechanically. No one can immediately figure out the reverse side of the action. It is necessary to balance the struggle in order that from the collision of opposites the movement to happiness arises, an ascent towards the good. Otherwise, ye will lose the guiding thread. Ye see for yourselves, millennia have passed, and on your planet there is still injustice and oppression. Millions of people live an insignificantly short life. In our common homeland in the old days, for some reason, no one ever, I repeat, ever destroyed the true criminals, by whose will, and only by it, the beautiful were destroyed, the good were killed, the useful were plundered and scattered. The killers of good and beauty always remained alive and continued their vile activities, and avengers like ye put to death not at all those who were supposed to die. Eradicating harm-bearing people must be done with very accurate aim, otherwise you will fight phantoms. Lies and lawlessness create new phantoms of crime, material wealth, and dangers at every step. On Earth, the growth of such phantoms was not timely taken into account, and humanity, fighting against them, only strengthened their psychological impact. We always remember that action is equal to reaction, and we maintain balance. And for ye, blind attacks will cause an increase in the suffering of the people, a deepening of the inferno. In this case, ye yourselves must be destroyed. So ye think us unnecessary? Followed the formidable question. More than that, harmful if ye fail to eradicate the main sources of evil. That is, as hunters used to say in ancient times, ye do not start hitting the slaughter places of the oligarchy. But this is only one step forward. It is useless without the second and third. It is not without reason that the shrine is called by the name of 3 steps. Rodis stopped, staring intently at the leader of the Grey Angels. Continue. he said quietly. After all, we have come to hear your advice. Believe me, we have no other objective than to alleviate the fate of the people by making our home planet happier. I believe ye, and in ye, Rodis said. But ye must agree, if lawlessness reigns on the planet and ye want to establish law, then ye must be no less powerful, albeit from the imperceptible shadow side of life, than the oligarchic state embodying lawlessness. The instability of a poorly organized society, in essence, lies in the fact that it is always on the edge of the deep abyss of inferno, and at the slightest shock falls into centuries of famine and slaughter. Completely analogous to climbing a steep mountain, only here, instead of gravity, it is the primitive instincts of people that act. Likewise, if ye do not provide people with greater dignity, knowledge, and health, then ye will transfer them from one type of inferno to another, likely worse, since any change in the structure will require additional forces. And where to take these forces, if not from the people, reducing their already meager well-being, increasing hardships and grief? But we are drowning in poverty. This means that we will never budge, never achieve unification, in order to resist the active corrupting power of bribery, demagoguery, and belief in fetishes. But you must remember that this power is at the lowest level, at the bottom of a social construction. To rise above this level means to overcome it and help others. Poverty can be different, and the material poverty of the planet Yanyak is not yet fatal, because she will find a way out in spiritual wealth. But for this, a foundation is required: libraries, museums, art galleries, sculptures, beautiful buildings, good music, dances, songs. And the notorious inequality in the distribution of material things is a big problem, unless the rulers try to maintain their position through the spiritual poverty of the people. The great reformers of the society of Earth, first of all, taught to preserve the psychic wealth of man. It can be preserved only in action, in an active struggle against evil, and in helping fellows, in other words, in tireless labor. Struggle does not necessarily require destruction. In struggle, one should use one's own special means, but only those that are permissible for the path of good, without deceit, torment, murder, and resentment. Otherwise, victory for the people will only mean a change of oppressors. What example can ye name? At a low level, chemical agents of fear, tears, and unbearable smell. For the destruction of records and denunciations, incendiary devices. In a direct collision, paralyzing means, frightening infrasounds, hypnotic glasses, and similar weapons of individual protection from personal persecution. At the highest level, highly developed psychic power, recognition of villains, suggestion, reading emotions. There is the greatest factor of deflection, of casting away in psychological terms, and it is accessible to every person, of course, with the appropriate training. What you consider to be magnetic, magical forces have long been used by us, even in children's games of disappearing and going through the looking glass. In order to put the higher powers of a person into action, a long preparation is needed, exactly the same that artists go through, preparing for creativity, for the highest flight of their souls, when a great intuitive understanding comes, as if from outside. And here too, there are 3 steps: renunciation, concentration, and the manifestation of cognition. And what think ye, mistress of the earthlings, on Yanyak are people deliberately kept at a low spiritual level? Asked the leader. It seems to me, yes, then we start to act. No matter how the rulers and serpent bearers guard themselves, they will not be saved. We will poison the water they drink from special water pipes, spray bacteria and radioactive poison in the air of their homes, saturate their food with harmful, slow-acting substances. For thousands of years, they have recruited their guards from the dimmest of people. Now this is impossible, and the lowly infiltrate their fortresses. And so, if the people do not understand your objectives, ye yourselves will become oligarchs. But surely this is not what you want? In no case. Then prepare a program of action that is clear to everyone, and most importantly, create fair laws. Laws are not for the protection of power, property, or privileges, but for the observance of honor, dignity, and to increase the spiritual wealth of each person. Start with the laws to create the 3 steps to a real society: the law, true public opinion, the faith of the people in themselves. Take these 3 steps and you will create a stairway leading out of the inferno. But this is not terror, of course. This is a revolution. But in it, The Gray Angels, if they are prepared, can keep the perpetrators of lawlessness at bay. But without a common cause, without the union of Lolly and Sholly, ye will turn into a bunch of oligarchs and nothing more. With the passage of time, ye will inevitably depart from the previous principles, for a society of a higher, communist order can exist only as a merged stream, constantly changing, rushing forward, into the distance, upward, and not as separate parts with petrified privileged strata. The leader of the Gray Angels raised his palms to his temples and bowed to Rodis. There is still a lot to think about, but I see the light. Wrapped in their cloaks, the Gray Angels departed, accompanied by Teo. Rodis leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. Before her sat the sculptor Ritin, completely immersed in his sketches. He was humming something very familiar. Fay Rodis remembered. It was an ancient melody of Earth. She remembered the words to it. I am sad because I love you. It was amazing how music, which had risen from the depths of centuries, connected both planets, broke through in the feelings of Earthlings and Tormanzians with the same stream of the beautiful. And in Fay Rodis herself, through the burden of duty and anxiety for the future of this people, confidence in the success of the earthly expedition broke through.